On this episode, we swap heartburn pills for red pills as we enter the Manosphere. Yep, the Manosphere. Don't worry, it'll all become clear. Hello and welcome to episode 9 of Mum, Dad's Got Another Tattoo, the Midlife Crisis podcast. I'm Mark and I'm joined once again by my co-host Richard.
Hello.
Hello, Richard. Now, we've got another guest on this week. How exciting. But before we do that, I am going to ask everyone, to get in touch and like and subscribe and do that algorithm stuff that we like. So get in touch with us at mumdadsgotanothertattoo@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts, your hopes and your dreams, and then we can mine it all for content. And also give us a follow on Instagram and TikTok and all the other places at Mum, Dad's Got Another Tattoo. Right, that's out of the way. So, another guest, as I say. But before we get him on, I want to put him into some sort of cultural context. Because last week we had a doctor of testosterone on. Go and check that out if you've got any queries or questions about testosterone replacement therapy, or as we're starting to call it, HRT for blokes. But this week is a slightly different vibe, because our guest, Paul Bauer, we'll introduce him in full very soon, is part of what I might call the Manosphere, this Andrew Tate light, maybe. Would you agree with that description?
I found that discussion interesting, because it's not, on the whole, a train of thought that spoilers, that I believe in or have even thought in that way. So it was quite uncomfortable, and knowing you as I do, I could see you visibly bristling with some of the stuff he was saying. So I thought, I'm going to let you take the wheel for this one. It was interesting. It's always good to get to look at things from other people's point of views, whether you believe them or not. But yeah, that whole manosphere way of thinking, doesn't really resonate with me.
No, me neither. But if those terms are new to anyone who's listening, I think we can put it in a bit of context. And the first part of it is this sort of red pill culture. Now, the red pill comes from the scene in The Matrix where Keanu Reeves is offered a blue pill and a red pill. If he takes the blue pill, he just goes back to his normal life that he knows. If he takes the red pill, the scales fall from his eyes and he, goes into the Matrix. The sort of toxic masculinity, the Manosphere, Andrew Tate have used this red pill symbolism, and they define it really as like, you take the red pill, you become a red pillar, and it awakens you to the truth that socially, economically and sexually, mainly sexually, I've got to say, men are at the whims of women's and feminists' power and desires. And it comes into a lot of this stuff around sex, about how women manipulate, etc., etc. Lots of toxic stuff that goes on there. But that's where the phrase the red pill comes from. And I also wanted to talk to you, Richard, about the Netflix show Adolescence.
Yeah.
Because red pill comes up in that as well. And I think you've got a unique take on that. So just before we get into that, just if you are one of the 7 people who haven't seen Adolescence, it's a Netflix drama, 4 episodes, and it centres around the murder of a teenage girl. First episode, we kind of see who the suspect is. Second episode is the investigation in a school. Third episode is a sort of why done it rather than a who done it, and then the 4th episode is the impact on the family as well. And it is, it's not a laugh. I can tell you that.
It's heavy. It's very, very heavy, but it's powerful. Yeah, it
is powerful. But I think you've got a unique perspectives, if you can have more than one unique perspective. But because you are a professional in the specialist education sector, so you're close to education and schools. But also, you're a parent of a man now in his early to mid-20s, and also a father of a daughter who's probably about to go into that socially online world. And one of the investigation strands that the police follow is, comments on Insta about people being incels and red pillars. And so I guess the first question is really, with your professional hat on, is, that school, it's a secondary school. It looks like what you might refer to as a bog standard comprehensive. But if you haven't been around schools or pupils for a while, that might shock the life out of you about how unruly, ill-disciplined it is, the lack of respect for teachers. Now, is that a dramatic device, or is it like how reflective of reality did you think that particular scene was?
I would say, from my opinion, from my perspective, dealing with schools, dealing with local authorities and parents of pupils that have had difficult situations, that does happen, but it varies from school to school. But yeah, those sorts of situations sadly do occur. But it depends a lot of the time on the senior leadership team at that school. If you've got a great senior leadership team, they have great support networks. They get the pupils involved in a lot of stuff. But a lot of it is socioeconomics of that region, depending where they are. I've dealt with schools from inner London, inner city schools, where you've got gang crime, local authorities around the country, where you have stuff like county lines and pupils that have experienced that. So it's difficult for schools. I see it from both sides, because I deal with the schools, deal with the local authority, and I deal with the pupils and their parents. I get to see both sides of the coin, so to speak. So I spend a lot more time with the parents and the pupils, but then I'm in constant discussion with the schools as well. So initially, I get to hear the issues from the pupil side and the parents, and a lot of the time they feel let down. They haven't been supported. But then, don't get me wrong, in a lot of cases, that is the case. But with a story like adolescence, how does a school really prepare themselves to deal with a murder? There's a difference between behavioural issues.
I understand that they're taking something and making it into an extreme example for dramatic purposes. Now, I guess there's two things that I've thought about this, which is, first of all, this online, bullying or communication, like a method of communication.
Radicalisation is what we call it.
And that doesn't necessarily mean to become a terrorist. It just means. And so, what does radicalisation mean to you in that context?
Where there's a train of thought where young people are being influenced by another group to think in a certain way. Where, if you watch the series, you can see how there's so much toxic masculinity within that group. That is a form of radicalisation.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Part of our safeguarding training as standard, radicalisation is part of it, but it's not just what you think it is. It's being influenced by groups you may see them as the people may see them as the in crowd. Toxic masculinity, the difficulties of parenting in the digital age, where, as you said, I was lucky with my son, nearly in his mid-20s now. He just missed that full iPhone and the phone generation. He just missed that. Yes, he was online with his Xbox, what have you, but he never had that 24/7 constant where the kids can be. But they go to bed. Okay, if they do have a phone, or the age to have a phone, once they close that door on all those apps, you really, up until a point, don't know what's happening. There are ways to legislate for that, but yeah, it's a scary thing. And as you say, I'm now coming into it. I've got a 9-year-old daughter, and I'm very aware, because of what I do and what I see, of what the pitfalls are.
Yeah, that is scary. The other thing that struck me is that the perpetrator comes from what you might consider a relatively normal working class background. Both parents are together, both working, live in a nice semi-detached in a new build estate. That's not really the background of someone that you would expect. Now, I understand they're doing this for dramatic purposes, but is that something that is that common, or when you look into backgrounds, is it people have got difficult backgrounds and upbringings, and it sort of comes out in their behaviour, and they're more likely to be radicalised in whichever way that means? Or could it just happen to anyone? And it's potluck.
In what I do, watching adolescents, I immediately just went into work mode, because it's not just behavioural stuff that I've dealt with. As I said, gangs, county lines. A lot of it's social emotional issues. There's been anxiety, ADHD, ASD, which is predominantly what we deal with, but there's obviously the behavioural issues, and then once you read the paperwork, a lot of it does come from their upbringing, and that's not the child's fault. It's families that may have a young child that may have a dad that's been in and out of prison. They may have seen abuse in the home, drugs in the home, sexual assault, whatever that may be, and that has a real influence on children's behaviour. So immediately, when I started watching adolescents, there I was like Inspector Clouseau, trying to pick up on any subtle tells that they may have dropped into the series. And don't get me wrong, there were certain bits I went, cracked it, and I was wrong with my assumption, just because those were things I was looking for from my experience. Yeah. But that can happen, and again, what it shows is it doesn't matter with this type of online connectivity with whether it be WhatsApp, other apps, whatever that may be, where they can be online bullying. How does a child get away from that when there's a group and you're at home being bombarded on WhatsApp or whatever it may be by people telling you they hate you? Yeah, it's horrible. Kill yourself. How do kids get away from that? And it's a scary thought as a parent.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we've said before, I've got a 9-year-old girl as well who has a phone, but it's not connected to like a network or anything. It's just like a mini iPad. But she does have connectivity with friends, which I do monitor very closely. To stop things getting out of hand. And she knows that and she's happy for me to read it. And it is under the auspices of being safe and good internet hygiene. But I guess if you have a 15-year-old, I think there was a lot of parents of 15-year-olds anyway looking at the sofa and go, "You're not doing any of this, are you?" Because you really don't know, and that is one of the challenges that we have to deal with. I mean, it is. I was trying to think then whether is this generation of kids, so their interaction with the world is so much different to, like, if you look at the difference between our parents' upbringing and ours, and our upbringing and our kids, I think there's far more similarities with that, like playing out, going over the park for 8 hours, all that cliched stuff, before paedophiles were invented, we were allowed to go wherever we want. And now you look at she's still quite young for that, but even so, I can't imagine a time where I can see her going round the corner, like going to her friend's house, and then me not really knowing where she is for 8 hours. And I don't think I've got the tools necessarily to deal with that. But this, I mean, or maybe that is part of being a parent as well, is that you discover that your parents didn't have the tools either, and they just made it up.
I think every generation does to an extent, but I think it's the environment you live in, where there's I think we're, with social media, with the news and everything like that, we're so more acutely aware. The people we now call paedophiles, and that was just a strange guy at the end of the street, and that was it. And that was how it was. What we've actually done is to give my daughter a little bit more freedom. And we've got 2 large garages with like a Tesco Express. At the end of our road. You're talking a few hundred yards, and we've got her a watch that has GPS in it. It's got an emergency button. She can make calls from it. So it's got its own. So it's safe. You put the telephone numbers in that she can call. Yeah. There's no WhatsApp or anything like that. So she can call me. She can call mum. She can call parents and a couple of her friends. But it's got GPS, and on the app you can see live where they are. So it's just the sort of thing. If she's her and a friend, I mean, well, we'll walk her to the end of the road and watch. But it's just one of those peace of mind things, just to give them that little bit more freedom.
I am totally on board with this, and if I could, I would inject it under her skin. And
yeah, get on the phone to Elon.
But yeah, but as you get a bit older, or as they get a bit older, where is the line, do you think, between keeping them safe and making sure you can actually relax, and actually being invasive? This is to me, I'm not sure where the line is, and I'm happy to stride straight over it in the interests of safety and in the end, fuck the line.
Yeah, but that listen, as I know, but I think it. And I don't know which way I'm going to go with this at the moment, but I'm not at the point where I need to deal with that, because my train of thought is, if you restrict them too much, we know what we got away with when we were younger. You remember that party that was for 2 weeks round mine. But we were...
Well, the thing is about that party round your house...
It was 2 weeks. It was a 2-week party.
It was very good. I enjoyed it a lot. But if you were wearing a GPS watch, your mum and dad would have looked and say, "Where's Richard? Oh look, he's at home again. Brilliant."
True. But I think there's. I think I'm at the camp of, listen, I've been there to a certain point. You can have your fun. I know you're going to do stuff. Just be careful. Let them understand that you're not this Victorian tyrant. Do you know what I mean? And you're let them understand. Listen, you're going to do stuff. Just be aware. These are the pitfalls.
Well, I think that is a good juncture at which to introduce our guest, because I think these things are, as we've explored just then, are very complicated and nuanced, and I think that is what the Manosphere lacks. Is the nuance and the complexities, and that's probably why it's so appealing, especially to a younger mind, because it's a very simple answer to a very complex problem. Let's get him on. Let's see what he says, and let's see what we think about it afterwards. And as always, it'll be good to hear what our listenership thinks as well. So I'd like to welcome to Mum, Dad's got another tattoo, our first ever guest. Paul Bauer is a certified master life coach and NLP practitioner with a speciality in helping men transform their relationships and reignite passion in their marriages. Paul has a wealth of experience guiding men to understand the psychology of attraction and the keys to reclaiming masculine confidence. Paul's expertise empowers men to take control of their romantic lives and truly get better with women. He's written a number of books on the subject, and he's also the host of the podcast Come On Man. Well, welcome to this podcast, Paul.
Hey, Mark, thank you so much for having me today, man. I really appreciate it.
No worries. So welcome to the show, Paul. Thank you very much for your time. And it'd be just great to know whether you've always been into life coaching and NLP practicing, or did you take a more circuitous route into this sort of life?
Oh, I definitely didn't mean to be here. No one, and we were talking about this offline, but I've come out of the red pill space. No one intentionally seeks out the red pill. Like, something bad happens when you when you end up in this space. But usually the smart guys turn it into a positive, right? So yeah, let me give you my Batman origin story. I grew up in Colorado, in the foothills outside of Denver, and I was always pretty good with girls. I always had girlfriends in high school, lost my virginity at 16, went to 4 different proms and stuff like that. But I was always the guy who was, I had what's called the sniper dating mentality, where it's like one girl at a time, you go all in on the first girl that's nice to you. And every girl's my soulmate, kind of thing. And I ended up leaving for the U.S. Navy when I was 18. And 2 years into my enlistment, I met my now ex-wife, and we barely knew each other. I met her. I came home on leave. We spent a week together. And then I flew home to San Diego, or back to my ship, and we had this long-distance relationship for about a year before I convinced her to move out to San Diego to live with me. And then 3 months after moving in with me, we got married. We basically eloped. There was a lot of reasons for that. I was getting ready to go on deployment, and I was a strong provider guy. I wanted to make sure she was taken care of. That sort of white knight type thing, and we ended up getting married, and it wasn't bad. It was pretty good, I would say, for the first half of our marriage, and we have 2 wonderful kids out of it. But man, after that 7-year mark, things just really started going downhill. I gained a whole lot of weight. She was just nagging at me like all the time. There was days where I'd work 17-hour days just to avoid going home. When I did get home, I'd just sit in the driveway for a little bit, just trying to psych myself up for the nonsense I was going to have to deal with when I got in the house. There was times where I just didn't want to go sleep in the same room as her, so I'd go out in the garage, grab a cot, and go sleep in my office, that sort of thing. But I was also the guy that would never quit, right? Like I made vows, I took them seriously, and that's sort of how my parents are. My parents are still together. They're coming up on their 50th wedding anniversary, but they hate each other. You know what I mean? And my dad is just resolved to be miserable. Like, this is just how life's supposed to be. We're all supposed to end up like Al Bundy, from Married with Children. And so that's how I thought life was supposed to be. Like, yeah, you have kids and you stick together for the kids, and that's what it's all about. And lucky for me, she had enough of it. In 2014, she filed for divorce, and I found myself back on the dating circuit without having any practice in like 15 years, because we were married for 14 years, and I was 50 pounds overweight. I didn't know what I was doing anymore. It was a whole new world, because when I met her, there was no dating apps, and now there's dating apps everywhere and social media. There was none of that when she and I met. And so I floundered on the dating circuit for a year, and I was like, what am I doing wrong? Like I used to be good at this. I used to be good at meeting women, and all of a sudden, like I can't get a date, or if I do get a date, like they're not interested in me and stuff. And so I floundered for about a year until I met a gal that on my podcast, I refer to her as Red Pill Chick, because it wasn't my marriage that woke me up to the psychology of women. It was this relationship, and it was the same thing. It was, I meet a girl that's nice to me. I go all in on this one. She had red flags out to wazoo, overlooked all of them. I could fix her. I could save this girl from her life of, whatever struggle. And so we get together, and I immediately go into what I call like husband mode, which is just complacent. I don't have to try anymore. I already got her. I stopped dating her, pretty much right away. And we were basically just living roommates, and I was just sort of expecting, that this is how life's supposed to be, right? You're supposed to be, not have the romance anymore. You just sort of like live together. And she basically mentally checked out about 2 years into that relationship, mentally checked out, started lining up her male orbiters at work and, wherever she could find them. She started acting so bad at the end of that relationship, but we were together for about 4.5 years, that I ended up breaking up with her. And then I found out that, in hindsight, that she ended up cheating on me at the end. But yeah, this time I had lost all the weight, because during that relationship, I lost all the weight. And so this time it was easy getting dates. All of a sudden I was getting dates like shooting fish in a barrel, but I couldn't keep women around more than 2 or 3 dates. And so I finally just had this self-realization that I'm repelling women. Like there's something I'm doing. The two biggest relationships in my life failed. My adult life failed. And then now I'm on the dating circuit. I can get dates, but women don't want to stick around. Like there's something that's, not working here. And one of the blessings of being in that relationship with Red Pill Chick was that she was really big into like self-help books and Audible and listening to audiobooks. And I just was like, man, I bet you there's some books out here I could start studying and figure out what I'm doing wrong. And so I just did a deep dive in the psychology of attraction, the psychology of women, the red pill space, which is really just the study of intersexual dynamics. And I started applying this stuff and just really having a lot of success in the dating circuit, spinning plates, as we call it, dating lots of women at once. And then I finally ended up meeting my current girlfriend, who we're getting ready to go into our 5th year. And I call her Nurse Chick because she's a nurse. But yeah, it was just, it was interesting because during that time of spinning plates and dating, I ended up in a men's group on Facebook called the 3% Man Group. And we were all studying a guy named Corey Wayne. He has a book called How to Be a 3% Man. And we're all studying that book and applying it. And I ended up just being really active in the group and going out on dates and posting date updates and swapping notes with the guys. And they ended up making me an admin in the group. And then eventually I got the idea of, well, I could start a podcast and just interview the guys in the group and see, like, how did you guys get here? And, what have you learned and all that kind of stuff. And so the podcast grew out of that. So I launched that in 2020. And and then shortly after I met Nurse Chick, and we've been dating ever since. And then I ended up meeting a lot of authors and other prominent guys in the red pill space. Guys like, I don't know if you've heard of him, Rollo Tomasi. He wrote a series of books called The Rational Male. He and I ended up becoming acquaintances. He invited me on a panel show on Saturdays called Rule Zero that I still do. And through that whole experience, I started working with more men. I started coaching, first started date coaching, and then that sort of morphed into more relationship type stuff. And what I kept seeing is that a lot of guys find their way to the space who are married, whose wives aren't sleeping with them anymore. And so they're just trying to figure out, like, why, things were hot and heavy in the beginning. Why won't she even talk to me anymore? And so I decided I was just really going to start focusing on those guys and trying to help guys avoid some of the same problems I did. And a lot of that stuff was because I got complacent in my marriage and I let things erode and I wasn't setting the tone and leading. And that got me to where I'm at with those relationships. And I could have prevented all of that if I had known what I know now. So now I'm just trying to help those guys save what they currently have, a lot of people in the red pill space like to sort of criticize marriage, and it's more not the institution of marriage itself, but the marriage laws that they tend to complain about. And so I get a lot of those types of negative guys in my comments when I make videos about saving marriages. And they're like, yeah, people need to avoid marriage at all costs, and they need to, not do this sort of thing and get the government involved. And I'm like, yeah, but what about the guys that didn't get that memo? Let's try to help some of these guys. So that's sort of where my motivation is these days.
Well, thanks for that. That's really useful. You've mentioned the red pill a couple of times, and that's not always got a great reputation or great connotations, and I think it's particularly acute at the moment in the UK. There's a Netflix drama called Adolescence, which mentions it's about a teenage murder, and the perpetrator is, if I'm reflecting this correctly, is spoken about as being a red pillar. There's an emoji of an exploding dynamite, which, news to me, at this age means that, you're going to be a red pill incel forever. And that sort of incel culture. And, there's deep ties to misogyny and almost seeing dating and sexual relationships as adversarial. There's a battle going on and I need to win that battle. And I'm that's something that I'm not particularly comfortable with, but I also understand that there are other definitions of that, and and it'd be great if you see where you sit on that scale.
Yeah, no, that comes up a lot. and when most people hear of Red Pill, they think of guys like Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate really made a name for himself, running with the Red Pill talking points. But it's interesting. I used to have a really negative viewpoint when it came to Red Pill as well, and I sort of got this mindset that it's all about hating women. Women are the problem and all this kind of stuff. And when I started really working with some of these guys that have like written the books that everyone quotes, right? Like I mentioned, Rollo Tomasi in the Rational Male series. Like every one of Andrew Tate's talking points comes from the Rational Male, every single one of them. And the thing is when you actually read that book, it's not about hating women. It's not about hating women at all. It's about understanding their nature. They're from an evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology, evolutionary biology standpoint, right? And then I found there's another guy in the space who's lesser known, but he's a genius. His name is Ryan Stone. He's written a series of books called Praxeology, because that's what Red Pill is. It's a praxeology. And
by praxeology, you mean like intentional behavior rather than sort of reactive or subconscious? Is that your definition of that?
No, a praxeology, it's more like you can almost look at it like the Chilton's manual. Like, do you know what a Chilton's manual is? If you work on your own cars, right? You go to the auto shop. You need to fix your Toyota or whatever. You go there and you get a manual. It's a book that explains how the car's put together.
Right,
and basically the guys at Chilton, what they'll do is they'll take a car, disassemble it, and show you how it was all put together. And then they put it all back together and show you how all the parts go. That's essentially what a praxeology is. It's basically a guy. It started out, at least in the Red Pill space, of guys swapping notes. Like, hey, this works. When I went on a date and I did these things, she responded well to it, right? So then other guys go out there and try to model that behavior, and they take what works and leave what doesn't. And so it really is just at the bottom level. It's like, this is how women respond. That's really all it is, right? And then people take their own sort of ideologies and their own morality, and they put it on top of that. But at the base level, it's just, hey, this is how women tend to think. This is how they tend to operate. And you can use that to your advantage and have healthy relationships, or you can complain about it and wish it was different. And that's where you get a lot of these incel guys who get mad and complain about women, and they learn about women's nature, and then they hate them for it, and we actually call those types of guys that make that kind of content that will actually go out and like hurt women. We refer to those guys as black pill guys. Black pill is they learn the true nature of women, and then they hate them for it. Whereas real red pill is guys understand women's nature and accept it. They're like, okay, this is how they tend to operate. Cool, I can work with that. Now that I understand, and so that's where I'd say the difference is. And there's really a whole sort of spectrum that guys go through when they find their way to the space, and it's very much like the 5 stages of grief, right? We call it the 5 stages of Red Pill. It's literally the same thing, though. But usually when you first get to the space and you learn this stuff and you realize that everything you thought you knew about women isn't exactly accurate, like the whole Disney fairy tale and this idea that women are sort of raised to be the romantics and they love and guys are just, this hornball sex guys. It's like, no, actually guys are more idealistic when it comes to marriages and relationships. And, they want to be that white knight for her that comes riding in on the steed and rescue her from her life. And women tend to be more opportunistic. They tend to marry up, right? They like to date guys that have a higher status than them. Typically, they like guys that make more money than them. And it's not that women like money per se, which is that's another talking point you hear out there. Like, oh, women only care about money. It's no, they what they're attracted to are the traits that men who are successful typically have, right? Like confidence, assertiveness, decisiveness, stuff like that. Women like that, right? what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that.
No, I don't suppose there is anything wrong with that. But I'm still not entirely comfortable with the whole proposition. And I guess like one of the reasons is that maybe it's just a terminology that sort of seems a bit abrasive to me about, strategies that work, what works, what doesn't on a date. And that might work, say, in the short term. But when you want to build a relationship, what actually works is authenticity, right? Okay, on the first, you always present your first and second date version of yourself and insist that, you pick up the wet towels. Yeah. And I haven't been on a date in about 20 years, like a first date, that is. Anyway, but it's that kind of language where almost that, if I think back to my younger single self as well, is that, there were things that worked, but I don't think it helped me have a particularly healthy relationship because they were lacking in authenticity.
Sure. No, and you're not wrong there. If you ever read the book The Game by Neil Strauss, it really illustrates that very well. So like I said, Redpills sort of came out of the pickup artist community, and that was just, hey, what works, what doesn't when it comes to dating. And you're right, that surface level stuff works really great at getting women to sleep with you quickly. It's terrible at keeping women engaged in a long-term relationship, and that's what they found out in that book. And a lot of people love that book because it talks about pickup artistry and the tricks that you can get to meet a girl in the bar. But if you really read between the lines when you read that book, they were targeting specific women that dressed a certain way, that were, they had the big hoop earrings and the provocative clothes. They weren't running this game on the church girl down the street. You know what I mean? That was one thing. And then two, they all wanted something deeper. They were all very good at getting women to sleep with them quickly. They were, every weekend, but they would find these certain women that they just would fall in love with and go head over heels. And these women didn't want anything to do with them because they weren't authentic, like you're saying, Mark. So what Red Pill took a little bit of that, and then they would try to figure out, okay, why does this work, right, at a deeper level? Why does this work at a deeper level? And that's where they brought in the evolutionary psychology and evolutionary biology to try to figure out why these certain things clicked in the long term. And so it actually goes much deeper, and you can use this stuff in a long-term relationship. And it's not about running game. It really is about having more of a dominant masculine presence. It's all about having a good mental frame, being able to handle women's tests. Because in a long-term relationship, women will test you. They'll test you when you're out dating too, but the tests change when you're married. And a lot of times women's tests are subconscious. They don't even realize they're doing it. But they want to see if the guy that they're with is genuine, if he's authentic, if this is really who he is, or if this is a facade, right? And that's where women can sort of see through the game and the pickup artistry nonsense, and that's why they don't stick around with those guys. It's because those guys are totally fake. But if you can really embody some of the principles, not the game itself, but having being an assertive guy, being a confident guy, being a guy with good social skills, being a guy who has a little bit of emotional intelligence where you can understand where she's coming from and have a little bit of empathy, that sort of thing. Women like that. Like if you can set the tone and lead a relationship properly, women like that, and they want to stay with a guy like that long term.
If I think about my wife, I don't think we've been married 15 years this year. We've been together nearly 20 as well. And I guess there's two things. First of all, I don't think she would say that she was testing me. She's just asking me to do some shit and that needs to be done, right? And you mentioned, the nagging wife. I have found in my own empirical study that the nagging decreases or even stops when you do what the fuck she's told you to do. That is and she's not doing it like just to test you. It's because it's something that needs done that will make yours, hers, everyone's life a bit easier. And
yeah, well, that's different, right?
Test.
That's not testing. That's her handing out chores to you. And if you Okay, so I would say a good marriage test would be, let's say you have perfectly good cupboards in your kitchen, right? And she gets a wild hair. She just got done watching Trading Spaces or some kind of home improvement show, and she gets this miraculous idea for a big project for you to do, Mark, not for her to do, obviously, because women aren't going to, demolish the kitchen. But she's going to have this grand idea that you have to do, Mark. Well, anyway, you're looking at this like a tremendous expense that doesn't need to be done. The kitchen's fine. She just got a wild hair one day because women tend to be driven by emotions, right? So she got this grand idea to remodel the kitchen. It doesn't need to be done, right? But if she says, Mark, we're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars to remodel the kitchen that we don't have, we're going to go into debt for it, and you're like, well, I just want to make her happy, I guess I'll do this work for her. You just failed a test, and she, it might not seem like a test. She's probably not actively doing it. Like I said, a lot of their tests are subconscious, but the moment she's able to manipulate you to do some of these types of things, she starts losing respect for you. And so if you could just say, honey, no, we're not remodeling the kitchen. The kitchen's fine. You passed her test. She might throw a little bit of get a little huffy about it. Well, no, and start arguing with you about it. And if you just maintain frame, like, you're so adorable when you're mad, but we're not remodeling the kitchen, right? 30 minutes later, and I've seen this happen just countless times, you'll find that she might get mad in the moment, but 30 minutes later, she's going to crawl in your lap, and because she respects you for standing up to her nonsense. And it's interesting. There's a guy in this. He doesn't.
My experience of married life is nothing like that at all, and that's what I mean by that sort of adversarial approach. Which, my perspective is, my marriage is not like that at all, and those decisions are not I'm not some sort of permission slip writer about what we do and what we don't do. Like, she'll have ideas about what she wants to do with the house. Some of them I agree with, some of them I don't. Some of them are just like, I haven't got a big opinion on them. So if you do, go for it. I don't mind. If you want to paint the lounge, like, my wife's a teacher, so every school holiday, one of our rooms will change colour. She'll do it, and I'm happy for that to happen. I don't see that as.
But she's doing it. She's doing that.
Yeah.
She takes. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with her taking on her own projects. Yeah, nothing wrong.
And
with that.
She's quite, she's really independent, and she comes from a sort of her and I went to a boys' school and a girls' school that were related, and from her education background, it's sort of like, men, boys, they're nice to have, but you don't need them. So none of this sort of resonates with me. And there was another thing that I really wish I'd been on when I was a lot younger. There was a game show on a Saturday night in the UK. It was called Take Me Out. And it was one of these shows that it's a big tube, and a guy would come down this lift, elevator, and there'd be 20 or 30 girls between ages of 18 and 25. And they would all have a light on, and he would come out, and there would be 3 or 4 rounds, and every time they didn't like him, they would turn their light out. And at the end, he would have whoever was left, he could choose to take on a date, and it was a dating show, and that. About 15 years ago. I'm not sure it would really fly in today's.
No.
But the great thing about it was that even the sort of stereotypically what a man might think an objectively attractive man would look like, or a higher status male, is actually not what they would look like. The lights would go off for ridiculous reasons. He would. I don't like his shirt tucked in like that. Oh, I can't date a man with brown boots. All these things. And the reason why I say that is that these tips seem very generic and stereotypical, and also doesn't correspond with my experiences. So I just wonder whether it's it works, if that's the right term, for a very small subset of men and women, and if they have more traditional conservative views of what a relationship should look like. I would say all of the women that I know, and certainly the one that I'm married to, they do not think that is not how they view life at all.
Yeah, and I'd say to be fair to Mark, in my relationship, I mean, going back, we've been friends since kids, and our wives are in many ways quite similar.
I'd say so.
Yeah, and it's very much, you use the kitchen analogy. We're looking at a remodel this summer, extending, and I'm the one saying we should go bigger, where she's the one saying let's go back. Either way, it's not going to kill me. So but I'm not sure me saying right, putting my foot down there works in many of the scenarios in my life. But I do understand, you know, there will be a subset or a group of the society where that will work. But as I say, like Mark said, from my personal standpoint, it doesn't fit.
Yeah, well, you'll actually find that it works for a vast majority. and not a small subset. And an interesting thing is, one of the things that I teach guys when it comes to a long-term relationship is to sort of embody a captain, executive officer type mentality when it comes to your relationship. And that's something I learned from a guy named Athol Kay. He had a really great book that came out in 2011 called The Married Man's Sex Life Primer. But what he talks about is very similar to what you guys are talking about. It's not like ruling with an iron hand. You know, it's not like, hey, it's my way or the highway. But it is, I am the captain of the ship. I am the leader of the relationship. And I have a vision. I have a vision for the relationship, and I'm overall in charge of the mission. The executive officer is also a leadership position. It's not like she's relegated to, a servant type person. You know, she's probably very smart. There's no reason. That's probably why you married her, right? So there's no reason why you can't go with her ideas if they don't conflict with yours. But at the end of the day, you're overall in charge of the mission. So if she says
I really don't like this hierarchical.
I know a lot of modern guys don't like it, Mark. They don't.
I don't like it.
That's because society now, they're like, yeah, we're equal partners, and she has equal buy-in.
I'm a big proponent of that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you'll find that a lot of what the problem with that mentality for a lot of men, maybe not you, Mark, but a lot of men, a big problem with that is when they have a equal partnership mental model of a relationship, they actually aren't having equal partners. What they end up doing is they defer to their wives for decision making, because they don't want to upset her. They don't want to make her mad. So they're like, hey, honey, I'm thinking about remodeling the kitchen. Maybe it's their idea, right? And I'm thinking about remodeling the kitchen. And is that okay with you, honey? Because they want her buy-in because she's an equal partner. Well, now she's being the decision maker. She's not an equal partner. Now she's in charge of the relationship. And you'll find that a lot of women, when they feel like they're being put in charge of a relationship, they don't like it because that forces them into their masculine sort of energy, and they have to now make all the decisions. They start looking at their husbands like another one of the kids in the house. They start complaining about him like, oh, he's too passive. I have to decide everything. I have to plan all the dates. I have to do all this kind of stuff. And women start resenting a lot of guys like that. So might not be your situation, Mark, but it's a very common situation that we see everywhere.
Well, you're only getting my side of the story, don't forget. And one of the talk about one of your books, for example. It's got quite a provocative title. I haven't got it written down in front of me, but I think it's "How to Get Her to Fuck You Again,"
Yes.
So there's two things. I guess that's like you're in a crowded space there, and that's a great way to stand out from it as well. But I think it does address an issue that a lot of, especially middle-aged marriages get to, which is the dead bedroom. Now, I guess there could be lots of different reasons for that, like physiological, hormonal, post birth, all that sort of stuff. Let's assume that's not the case in this. You've got a whole book on it, but for people in that situation, I guess the the mainstream advice would be about communication. Talk about it. As I understand it, you think that's important, but ultimately not what's going to get resolve that issue. So from your perspective, if there was like an overarching strategy, if you like, what might that be?
Yeah, no, what I typically say is communication is not the key to a healthy relationship. It's like the key to conflict resolution, which tends to happen in a relationship, but that's just a small part of the relationship. But if you guys are truly going to stand the test of time, it's genuine desire. She has to want to be there. You have to want to be there because you genuinely love each other. So that's the real key. Communication can help with some of that stuff, because if you guys have constant conflict, you guys are going to eventually not like each other too much, right? But if you learn how to handle it better, then you're going to be fine. So some of the stuff that I talk about in my book, actually, we call it the Luca model: listen, understand, clarity, action. But a lot of that stuff, Mark, comes from what we would call blue pill relationship type advice, right? Like men are from Mars, women are from Venus, right? That's very women-centric relationship advice, but it actually has some merit to it. If you've ever read that book, I don't know if you've ever read it, but the big takeaway from that book is that men and women don't like unsolicited advice, but for different reasons, right? So men don't want their wives' input on what they're doing, the project they're doing, because it feels like they're stepping on our manhood. Like, hey, I got it. I'm a man. I know what I'm doing, right? That's why we don't like asking for directions. And then women, they don't want unsolicited advice from their man because they just want their man to listen. And so 9 times out of 10, women don't even want the problem solved. They just want you to understand where they're coming from. And so I teach some of that stuff in my book. I call it the Luca model because it's pretty easy to understand. Listen, understand, clarity, action. And one of the things that guys typically do, especially if their wife is ending up being very naggy, very, complains a lot about what you're doing, what you're not doing, all that kind of stuff. A lot of guys, they default to what we call deering mode, which is defend, explain, excuse, rationalize. They're always trying to justify why they're doing what they're doing. And that tends to create an argument because she doesn't care why you're doing what you're doing. She doesn't like what you're doing. And so she's nagging you about it, right? And when you end up having to justify and explain yourself, you actually put yourself at a one down position from her, and which you're not equal partners again. You're now below her, and she's now the arbiter of what's right and what's wrong in the relationship. So we teach guys, don't do that. Don't justify, don't defend yourself. Like if she's mad at you for doing something, you don't have to defend why you're doing or not doing anything. But a lot of that, she just wants you to listen. And so you just listen to her, like her point of view. You ask clarifying questions, you let her really get it off her chest. And then the last part of it is action. So maybe you are messing up, Mark, and you're not taking the trash out enough, and you could do that better. Well, the action is, okay, honey, I hear what you're saying. I'll make sure that I start paying attention to the trash can more. Right. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff can help in a relationship, but that's not the overall key to a healthy relationship. I truly don't think it is. So, but yeah, it's helpful.
Okay, and if somebody wanted to buy one of you've read more than one book, I understand, is that right? And if they wanted to get hold of it, where could they find that?
Yeah, I have 3 books out. But the latest one is Get Her to Fuck You Again. It's really meant for guys that are in this situation. They're married. They've been married for, 15, 20, 30 years, but they're not having sex anymore. Their wife might even be their best friend, like, hey, she's my partner, she's my best friend, but she won't fuck me anymore. I don't know what's going on. You mentioned, it's funny, you mentioned, sometimes it's a hormonal issue. Sometimes that stuff does creep up, right? But you'll find, Mark, that even women with hormonal issues, when they get divorced and they're back out in the dating circuit, man, they are motivated to fix that. They are motivated to go to the doctor and get something done about that, right? But when they're in a marriage that they hate, it's a good excuse. It's a good excuse to not have to have sex, right? They have a headache every night. And so a lot of that is really just because she's lost attraction for you. It's not because of whatever. It just ends up being a convenient excuse to not have to put out anymore. And so the idea of get her to fuck you again is for men. It's for men to work on themselves, to become more attractive, to learn how to stop being complacent in the relationship, being an active part in the relationship, and more than being an active part, but actually take some ownership of the relationship. And so that's really what that book's about. And it's about turning that whole dynamic around and getting your wife to a place where she looks at you again like you're her best possible option. So that's what it is. Get Her to Fuck You Again. It's available on Audible and Amazon. If you just do a search for Paul Bauer on Amazon or Audible, you'll find my books there.
Okay, and we mentioned your Come On Man podcast, and you referred to it at the beginning as well. I assume the wherever you get yours applies to that. How often is it out, and what sort of format is it?
Yes, it's out. I have new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. In fact, right after this recording, I got to go and do my live episode. So I do it live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And then when it's over, the replay is available on all podcast platforms. But yeah, typically I spend Monday and Wednesday, we're talking about dead bedroom situations and relationship type advice. And then Fridays, I call it Frame Fridays, which is all about men's mental health and mindset when it comes to a relationship that tends to make men a little more effective in their relationships.
Okay, great. So Amazon, Audible, or the Come On Man podcast, wherever you get yours. That's what I've been saying about this one. Anyway, because there's so many platforms these days. But yeah, really appreciate your time. Lots to think about, and hopefully we'll have that'll provoke some reaction, and maybe you'll come on again to either defend or promote or whatever it is. Whatever reaction we get, we'll feed that back to you. And if you've got some comments on that, there's always the open door and right of reply that we'll give as well. So, but for now, thank you, Paul, for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
So that was Paul. What did you think of it? And then you didn't get involved that much, but I rather felt that was due to me rather than you.
Well, listen, as I say, me and Mark have been friends since we were kids, and I know his visual cues, verbal cues, and Mark is, as I've said before, and here I think sometimes right, sometimes wrong, always certain. I was completely in agreement with what Mark was saying, but I'm not I'll just let the conversation slide and go, okay, I'd rather it be done. Mark, thankfully, for this podcast, I'd rather it be utter dross, me and him sitting there in silence, will bring up the points that we both want to bring up. Was visually bristling and moving in his chair, and I know those cues.
Yeah, I think bristling is a fair description of that, because I was actually quite conflicted, because I felt he was quite charismatic. He was good to listen to, and I could listen to him for a long time, but I disagree with loads of what he said. I put him in a category where I'd like to go for a beer with him, but after a couple, things could get lively. Do you know what I mean? The topics could get a bit woo. Yeah, that's what I felt as well.
And the core, the genuine core of what he was saying, yeah, but the what was around it and how you get to that point, I genuinely didn't agree with. So for me, the way I deal with it is, okay, you're in America, I'm going to let this slide, but I'm pleased, as I knew you would take him to, put your points across to him.
Yeah, I felt a little bit uncomfortable about the whole thing, because, I felt our role as hosts and a guest, even mentally, that puts you in a certain space where you're allowing someone a little bit of leeway that, as you said, with the archetypal beer, I'll be all over him straight away, as you know. In fact,
you'd be giving him a piggyback in the kebab house at 2 o'clock in the morning. Let's be honest.
Well, it could go that way. It could go the other way, where I was at a client dinner and basically told a client that his entire career was down to the fact that he was a white middle-aged man.
This is a conversation for another time, and that will be recorded.
Yeah, not an ideal Bill. I think I recovered from it straight away. But overall, so this is the thing that is, how I'm reacting to this is, first of all, I don't like this idea of things what work, and Paul's podcast goes on in other directions about NLP, getting her in your frame and all these other...
It's formulaic.
It is formulaic, it's inauthentic, and I think it's manipulative as well, which is what I don't like about it.
It's having a playbook to woo women, and that's what I don't agree with.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And then within your relationship, I mean, the thing that sticks out for me is this whole thing about the ship. Your relationship's the ship. Your relationship is a vessel, and you're the captain of it. Your wife, she can be like an executive level position, that's fine, but ultimately you're the captain.
Let me tell you something. If that was the hierarchy in my relationship, this ship would be going down like a fucking Bismarck.
Yeah, well, there is an element of that. But I decided to ask my wife about whether this whole, what position she wants to be on this ship, what role. And,
I love that what she said.
Well, I presented the options of are we captains or co-captains? You look after something, I look after something, and we're what? And her reply surprised me somewhat in that what she actually wants to be on this ship is a VIP passenger.
I think if I asked Amanda the same question, and I gave her the options, that would be her answer.
The sort of passenger that would walk around and say, Should water be coming in there? No.
And can I get a refund?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of buyer's regret for my wife over her journey. But this whole imposition of a hierarchy, and it's also a self-serving hierarchy.
Yeah.
I'm the man. I go out and do the work. And I've spoken to other people in the intervening period as well, and they say things like, "Oh, I went to work and it was never enough." And the answer to that, I think, is no. You're right. It's not enough, but not in there. Oh, it's not enough. There's no there ain't no pleasing you, Chaz and Dave style.
True.
It is a great song, but in the sense that no, it's not enough. There's loads of other stuff to do, and this idea that you get up, go to work, and come home, and that's your bit done, is gone, and rightly so. I mean, I can't say that I was born into this this mindset, but it's one that I have come to understand and come to accept over time. But I think there's this big pushback against it, saying no, the man is the hunter-gatherer and all that sort of stuff.
I'll hold my hands up that with my previous job and the influences around me, as you know, I'd say half my personal problems were caused by that thinking. I go to work.
Yeah, I've done my bit. I've
done my bit. And yeah, my wife is basically, I wouldn't be where I am now without her saying, you can do that. Yeah, and that support network and having that person behind you is worth more than that archaic view of, well, I do this, you cook dinner. I've got the barbecue on right now. They're out. They've gone out and done the horses. I love cooking. It's great. I've washed my car, took the dogs out.
Yeah, today is a Saturday. I should.
It's not a Tuesday like midday. Yeah,
but that is a key point, because it's an old-fashioned view of it.
Yeah.
Where I go to work and you look after the house is a relic from an era where where you could survive quite nicely on a one-income family, and I don't know anyone who can do that particularly comfortably at the moment. So what you have is two people going out to work. And then you come home and because of probably, power structures that mean that you earn more money, but that's not because of your massive talent and intellect. That's because society has been set up for your benefit.
And it doesn't change the stresses on either person in the relationship. So both people come home with the same stresses, and it's like, well, I earn 10 grand, whatever it is, more than you. So my issues are more important than yours. That's not what it is.
No, totally. There's another thing that I have considered as well, is this sort of rule of the jungle evolutionary thing. First of all, I've looked into this, and we don't know what the sort of relationship arrangements are in prehistoric man. We don't, right? Yeah, it's unknowable.
Didn't they record it?
No, funny enough, but very light on podcasts.
They had a lot on their hands rather than looking at us for their social emotional needs.
Yeah, exactly. So record keeping, not a great feature of Cro-Magnon man, but the animals that these guys always use as examples of how the male should be are always bears and wolves and lions and tigers, like the sort of lone wolf stalking the prairie. I'm the alpha male and I need to dominate my space. It's never things like a penguin that sits on an egg for 8 months in the Arctic, but like the male penguin will do that. It's never like a beaver, which is an animal that has like monogamous, for the most part, mating style. All these cute little fluffy things. There's still masculine versions of that. It's always like the big bear and an animal that would, quite frankly, tear your head off in 2 seconds. It's like, you are not a bear, you are not a wolf, right? So stop applying the rules as you see it to your own relationships.
Yeah. You work in an office in central London and all you do is cardio. Please. Yeah. I mean, half my TikTok is taken up by videos of giant otters. The dads have the little ones on there. Like, oh my God.
So it'd be really great for if people could get in contact with us and let us know. Ask your wife, partner, what part of the ship they want to be on, and we can see whether this is just because it could be we're in the minority here and we got this completely wrong, and. I'll tell you something though. I did actually take something from that interview that was positive into my relationship, which is that I've realised that I'm kind of deferring to my wife for decision making a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Out of a supposed what do you want? I will do whatever you want, and that kind of. What I hadn't appreciated is the additional mental load that is placing on her to actually make the decision, and so that was something I that I took from that interview. Not that I'm taking over decision making and everything goes through me and I've got the final say, but definitely a dial that needs moving back to the centre a lot of the time, which is don't ask, just do it.
Just do.
A lot of the time, you know instinctively what the big decisions are. I mean, you're not going to come home and say, I've booked a holiday next week without telling you. But there's loads of other stuff around the house that can be done that often I will ask her, do you want this done? Do you want that done?
Yeah.
And I think it is incumbent on me to take a little bit more of the lead in that. But again, that's what I'm saying. It's redressing a balance back to where it should be, rather than saying, right, I'm the man, I'm taking over, and you'll respect me as a result of that. I think the mechanics of it are completely different.
But I think what you're saying is you're taking a load off her plate as someone. Right, this is our environment, this is our house. I'll do this, and rather than the caveman approach, I'm doing this, basher. it's a balance between that. And yeah, as I said, the core of what he said, I agreed with. It's just the path of getting there I didn't.
Yeah. Well, that's true. There is absolutely no way I can get comfortable with this hierarchical view of a relationship where ultimately you're in charge. It's just a no. But as I say, that's
our environment.
Yeah, but that's our personal view and our take on it. It'd be good to hear from everyone else what theirs is. And also good to hear what you thought of the guest episode. We've got a couple more lined up over the next few weeks. If that's something that you want to hear more of, we'll get more people on. And if that's something you want to hear less of, then we won't. So we will leave it there. So thank you very much for listening and talk to you very soon. Goodbye.
See you later.